Hey everyone, it's May and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hello. I am making some videos about my experience with TAPIFer that I did last year in La Rochelle. I already posted a video about specifically the teaching portion of TAPIFer, and this video is kind of going to be all of the other aspects. So I'm going to be focusing on money, general living, and traveling are going to be the sections of this video, if you will. I feel like there's already a lot of information online through other videos or through just the information that the program gives you on the whole preparing to go, getting established once you are in France. So I'm just kind of trying to fill in the gaps and just give kind of my own experience. Not to say that this is going to look anything like this for anyone else, but I know before I went that I just kind of wanted to get a better idea of what day-to-day life was like, finances, things like that. So that's what this video will be. So we'll start out with money. I would recommend moving to France with around $3,000 saved, especially if you plan on traveling during the first October vacation, because you do get paid vacation as a part of the school system, and you have one that is like right when you get there. Basically you have like 2 weeks of work when you have a vacation. You could definitely make it work with less, but I just think it's a good idea to have a cushion. So this would not be counting your background check, birth certificate copy, visa, or flights, but just everything else. So like your train from the airport to your hotel or Airbnb, wherever you're staying, because if you don't have housing arranged, you're going to have to pay for like an Airbnb or a hotel while you apartment hunt. You can definitely look in the Facebook group to see if there's anyone that you can share this with. I mentioned this in the other video, but there are really helpful Facebook groups. So if you just look up TAPIFer 2022 to 2023 or your specific region, there should be a general group and then a group for your region on Facebook, and super helpful, and people give you information on whatever you need. So you have a train to your city, or maybe even another flight. If you have to pay for extra luggage, staying somewhere potentially before you can find an apartment, then the security deposit on that apartment, the rent on that apartment for the first month, if you have to pay at the beginning. You also have to validate your visa within the first 3 months that you're in France. So technically you don't have to use this money for that. You could wait, but I just did it at the beginning because I wanted to get it over with, and that costs 200 euros by itself. Also just like fees while you are wiring yourself money to your French bank account, or like if you're getting it out of an ATM, that's also going to be something that you have to take into account. Not very much, but just the small things add up. And then you also have to take into account 4 weeks of groceries, potentially more if you arrive earlier, and anything that you're going to need for your apartment, like extra linens, kitchen supplies, bathroom supplies, storage, organizing, any of that stuff, cleaning products, personal care products, etc., etc. So it really adds up, and like I spent so much money just like getting established when I got there. Unfortunately, there was an email mix-up, and so my school did have housing arranged for me, but I didn't find that out until the last minute, and I had already booked an Airbnb that cost me $600, and I could only get a refund for half of it, so I ended up flushing a lot of money down the toilet. Just kind of have to be prepared for things like that is what I'm saying. Like I feel like no matter what happens, like something's gonna go wrong. Like you're gonna miss a train, or you're not gonna be able to find an apartment. Like I'm not saying it's going to go wrong, but like have enough money that you're prepared for if it does, because you don't want to be stranded in a foreign country and not have money. Also, just to keep in mind with all of this, it's actually not guaranteed that you'll get paid by the end of October. It could actually be all the way until the end of November if there's issues with the banking. I think they say that in your handbook, but just keep that in mind also when you're deciding how much money to bring. So take into account like your lifestyle, what you see yourself spending, whether you have an apartment arranged or not, and if you do, if you know how much the rent is, where your region is. Where I lived was like, I guess on the expensive side, but really not as bad as like Nice or Paris or something. So just kind of take all that into account. I would say 3,000 is like a good baseline. So as for finances throughout the program, once you start getting paid, I was definitely able to afford everything because my rent was really cheap. I lived in an apartment that was a studio apartment above the boarding school portion of my high school. I loved it. It was super convenient to get to my classes at the high school, and there were 2 other assistants on my floor. There was a Spanish assistant and a Russian assistant, and then there was also someone who worked for the school who lived like on the other side of our hall by the stairs, and then that was it. We were just like this little portion on top of like the bigger boarding school, and I had no issues with with noise except like one time when people were having a party downstairs, which I don't even think was the students. I'm not really sure what that was. But I thought that like, oh, like I'm gonna be on top of boarding school, like kids are gonna be partying, like making a ton of noise. Like I could not hear anything coming from below me. So like, thank God. Anyways, that was just a giant tangent to say that my rent was 125 euros and my bus pass was 23, and I paid about 10 euros for my bank account every month. That's just the way it worked, is like they charged me every month to keep it open, plus the insurance that they made me get on the apartment. So that in total was like 10 euros. And then the rest of that money was for household supplies, grocery shopping, etc. And if I wasn't traveling, I definitely could have made that work. But since I knew I wanted to travel, I definitely brought a lot of my own money to help toward that as well. I also did some private tutoring every week, and that was nice to have some extra pocket money to get a coffee or an ice cream with a friend, or to get some takeout sushi. So if you're looking to do private tutoring, honestly, it all just fell into my lap. So I think this is kind of a common thing, like where a teacher will just be like, hey, I have a mom that's looking for a tutor for her student. You get in contact with them, and like for me, like I usually did like a preliminary meeting with them to see if it was a good fit. And my schedule of tutoring kind of like shifted throughout the year, but I always had, I think, like 1 or 2 students, sometimes 3 every week. One girl just came up to me by herself because she was like in one of my classes. She just wanted to do conversation, and she was like basically fluent. And so that was really fun too. I'd highly recommend doing that if you want to earn some extra income. I thought it was really fun, and it allowed me to connect with those students and really see them grow, like specifically. Whereas like in a class, it's kind of harder to see that what you're doing is really making a difference. But like I really enjoyed watching the students that I worked with like get more confident and stuff. Okay, so I called that section money, but I actually talked about the whole living thing. I was just gonna talk about my apartment, so I already said that, like where it was. Anyway, I just kind of said that when I talked about it. What else can I say about it? So yeah, like I said, I was on a floor with the other 2 assistants. That was really nice because like I had my own space, but then I could also like hang out with them if I wanted to. I don't know that this is that helpful for anyone because it varies so much, but like my apartment didn't have an oven. It just had a stove, microwave, and mini fridge with like a tiny freezer section, which I think is more or less like typical for a French apartment. I really didn't appreciate the lack of an oven, but you know, you just gotta make it work with what you have. Like I really wasn't gonna complain about anything with the apartment because of how cheap the rent was, and like with my city, you really couldn't find anything if that cheap if you were to go out and look on your own. It was small, but it wasn't too small. Like my bed was right here, the bathroom was right there, just like open, and then I had like a little wardrobe, drawers under the bed, and then there were doors that closed, but it was just one room, but like you close the doors in between the bedroom and the kitchen. And then there was a kitchen table, a TV that I never used, and some kitchen chairs. And the best part was the balcony. I got so lucky. I'll insert a picture right here. I had the best view. It was amazing. I'm always gonna miss that view from my balcony, and I could like go out there and have breakfast or tea in the morning, which was really only at the beginning and end because it was so cold in the winter, but like it was nice. So yeah, that was my apartment, and there was a washing machine right across the hall that was free, so I really lucked out with that. No dryer, obviously. You're not gonna find one of those unless you go to a laundromat specifically, but I really liked the fact that we had free laundry. And so yeah, you just have to buy detergent, and La Rochelle doesn't allow you to put your clothes on the balcony because I said it looks bad, so I had to hang them inside. That was kind of a downside because I feel like with how wet the climate was, it took a long time for them to dry, so I just had clothes hanging on my chairs all the time. But you know, it's okay, it's part of the experience. Anyway, so moving on to traveling. I just thought that I'd share kind of like what I did in terms of traveling because I was really happy with how I kind of organized everything. Just to give you guys some ideas, so one of, if not the very best thing about TAPIFer is the paid vacation. So around every 6 weeks, you get 2 weeks off. The exact dates will depend on which zone your region falls into, so you can just look up like French school zone holidays and just look for where your region is. It really makes it the ideal situation for traveling because you have your home base, but then you have this free time to go and explore and then come back like when you're already in Europe. Like coming from America, that's so cool, and I experienced this with study abroad too, but I had way more time with this program versus like just doing weekend trips with that, because coming from America, like when you go to Europe, you're jet lagged and you're there for like a week and you have to come home, but like you're there and you're already in the same time zone. It's a short flight to go to another country, so it's just It was great. Anyway, if you're planning on traveling, I would highly recommend getting the youth discount card for France's train system. It only costs 50 euros and it saved me so much money. You can get it if you're under 26. It's just called the SNCF and you can look it up on the internet or get their app. Highly recommend getting the app to buy tickets. Super, super convenient, and it just loads your card in there automatically so you get the discount. And then for planning where to stay and what to do on my trips, I always use TripAdvisor. Couldn't recommend it enough. After all of the success I had, I swear by TripAdvisor now. I would look up where I was going and look at a list of everything to do and see, and then kind of read up on them and choose the ones that I wanted to do. Usually if I'm going to a city, I choose like one museum and one church to see and then a few gardens, and I really just enjoy hiking and walking around, and it's just so fun. I don't try to like overbook myself. I really learned that with planning my own trips, is that it's okay to not see absolutely everything in a city. You can just pick and choose what you want to do, and it's okay. Anyway, you can also read people's reviews on TripAdvisor and like look at things to see if they're worth it. Like if it's an attraction and everyone says it sucks, then it's like maybe it's not worth it. Or you can look at hotels that you're thinking of staying at, what people said about them. This is not sponsored by TripAdvisor. I wish it was. I love them. So the first vacation I went on was only after like 2 weeks of teaching. Like I said, you have a vacation that comes up really, really quick. I just stayed pretty local for that one. I went to Bordeaux, Toulouse, and a smaller town called Albi that was just a day trip from Toulouse. I was in La Rochelle, so it was going like this in France. I went all by train and I stayed in Ibis budget hotels. I love them. They're very inexpensive compared to other options. They're no frills, just like a bed, shower, sink, toilet, but it's really nice if you're just sleeping there. Like it has everything you need. You can pay extra for breakfast, which I wouldn't because it wasn't that good, but it worked for me. Bordeaux is such a magical city that I would highly recommend visiting if you can. I ended up going back there a few times just like on day trips or whatever. Toulouse was cool too. I went there twice, and Albi was definitely worth it. So if you're in Toulouse, I would highly, highly recommend making the day trip to Albi. And then when we got back from vacation, I taught for 2 days, and then Wednesday I had an 8 a.m. class, and then I went to Dublin because Thursday was a bank holiday and I didn't have class on Friday. So I ended up just extending my vacation basically and going to Dublin. So I spent Thursday and Friday there and came back Saturday, and I stayed in a hostel called Jacob's Inn. Everything in Dublin is so expensive. So it was just like a 10-person hostel dorm that I stayed in, and there were little pods, so it's like you have a curtain at the end of your pod and then you're all walled in, and then there's like a shared bathroom. It was still really expensive, but it was actually a really cool experience. Like I try to avoid hostels when possible because I don't get any sleep, and the first night I didn't sleep at all, which was terrible because I was already really sleep deprived at that point. These girls had gone out and then they got back and one of them coughed all night. I was convinced that I was going to get sick from that, but I didn't. Anyway, beside the point, irrelevant. But hostels are a really fun way to meet people. Like I ended up just like talking to one of the girls that was there, and I should note that there were actually only 5 people because of COVID. They were only letting 5 people into a room instead of 10, so they could stagger where you were. So I got kind of lucky in that regard. But anyway, there was a girl that had moved there from Brazil, and she was looking for an apartment, and she was staying there while she looked. And we ended up going to Temple Bar together and just like walking around the city, and it was just so fun to like meet someone that way. I took a weekend trip with another assistant to go to Paris and Disneyland in December, which was super fun. I actually studied abroad in Paris, so I've kind of done all the big touristy things enough that I didn't feel like we had to run around and see everything in the day we had in the city, and she had also been there before, so we just kind of chilled and like walked around. We watched the twinkle lights on the Eiffel Tower, of course, and we did Disney, which I would recommend, but the prices can get really steep depending on when you go. That one was actually cheaper. I don't know why. It was in December, which is kind of like a big time for them because it's Christmas. But when I went back in May, it was like almost twice as much money. And granted, I did do both parks that time. We only did the one in December, but still. If you haven't been to Disneyland Paris before, it's definitely smaller than Disneyland in California, and I'm sure Florida, I haven't been to that one, but it's still really fun. And their Space Mountain's kind of the same vibe, but the ride, like the track itself is different, like the path it takes you on, like there's a loop in the roller coaster, and the Indiana Jones one's completely different. It's an outside roller coaster, and in their other park, the Walt Disney Studios, they have a few rides that we don't have in California, the best of which is Crush's Coaster. I waited in line for 2 hours for that one, but I'm telling you, it is worth it. I would have waited 3. It's so good. Anyway, moving on. So for Christmas break, I went to Toulouse and then a small town in the Pyrenees with another assistant. I should mention that the first 2, Bordeaux, Toulouse, Albi, and Dublin, were by myself. And then, like I said, I went to Paris with another assistant, and then I went to Toulouse in a small town in the Pyrenees with another assistant. I actually spent one night in Bordeaux first to give myself a little writing retreat because I was trying to write a book. And then we met up there at the train station and then went to Toulouse. And then in the Pyrenees, we stayed in this little town and spent a day at a ski resort, not skiing, but just like enjoying the snow and the vibes. And it was so relaxing and it was great. For February break, I took what is probably my favorite trip of all time, solo again, to the south of France. So when I was studying abroad, I did a very short trip to Nice, like 3 days, but the 3rd day I had to get up at like 4 a.m. to make my train, so it was really only like a day and a half by the time I got there on the first day. And I was so excited to go back, so I stayed at the cheapest Airbnb I could find in Nice. Everything is like through the roof expensive there, and I used Nice as my home base to take day trips or half day trips to Villefranche, San Remo, which is in Italy, Antibes, Menton, Monte Carlo, and Ez. So if you come to that area in the south of France, obviously Nice is kind of the #1 thing to do, and I did kind of the same things again. Like walking around the city, the Castle Hill hike is phenomenal. I would definitely recommend that. Just walking along the beach, there's like a nice walk that's like above the rocks because it's a rocky beach, so it's not the nicest to sit on, but there's like benches and stuff and a whole walkway. And there's a market that's really fun to look at too. But besides Nice, Antibes was my favorite place I went. I could not recommend this enough. I don't think that many people are going to watch this video because I don't want this to become like overrun with tourists like the other places there. Not like it's like completely unknown, but I feel like it's not as popular as the other places. And it was my favorite place I went the entire time I was in Europe. It has like the most charming old town with these cute little streets and these cute shops. So beautiful, all these little bakeries. And then I did the hike along the cape, I guess it's called. So like Antibes is here and it has this big outcropping. And I couldn't get all the way around because I was afraid I was going to miss my train, so I ended up kind of like cutting it off right here and coming back. But it was breathtaking. It was my favorite hike I've ever been on, my favorite views of the ocean I've ever seen. I'll insert some pictures right here if I can convince you to add this to your south of France itinerary if you're planning on going there. It was one of the best days of my life. Like, I just couldn't stop smiling on that hike because it was just incredible, and pictures do not do it justice. And it was really quiet on the trail too. There were other people, but it wasn't like super crowded. It was so peaceful. Cannot recommend it enough. And then for my final trip, I visited Austria and the Czech Republic. So I went to Salzburg, Hallstatt, I still don't know how to pronounce it, Vienna, and then Prague. If you go to Salzburg and you're a Sound of Music fan, I truly can't recommend doing the Sound of Music tour enough. It was 50 euros, but it was 100% worth it. I've been obsessed with that movie since I was really little, and that had been a bucket list thing for me. And you get on this bus and you get to see all these different places that were in the movie, not just in Salzburg, but also in the Lake District outside of the city. And it was magical, and the tour guide was so entertaining. So highly recommend. Prague was also a highlight. That city felt like a fairy tale. It was definitely very, very crowded. There were so many tourists there, and it felt pretty touristy, but it was really, really fun. I think basically everyone I've talked to has loved Prague. It's just beautiful. And so that trip was after classes had ended, because the way it shook out with my school zone was like we ended in the middle of April, and then so I just had the 2 weeks of vacation. For some people, I think they actually had it more at the beginning of April and they had to go back again and finish out their classes, but it worked out really well. But I was just done, had my vacation, and then I went to Paris. I went to Disneyland again with another assistant right before my flight home, and that was her first time in Paris, so we kind of tried to do some of the touristy things. Unfortunately, I also had to like mail some stuff to cancel my phone plan and whatever, so it kind of got in the way, but we had a really good day and it was a great way to like close off my time there. Yeah, I'm just like really happy with the traveling that I got to do, and how I organized it and what I got to see. I would really recommend like seeing as much as you can in France. Like I said, if you get that youth discount card, that can really help with the train tickets. Like there is so much to see in France. Like I didn't even see everything that I wanted to. Like I still haven't been to some of the places in the north or like anywhere in the east or like Marseille, like all of that. Like I still haven't been to like a lot of the places in the south west either. There's so many things to see and you have those vacations. It's just so nice, and like you can definitely do it for cheap if you, like I said, get the discount card. If you're looking to fly somewhere, like fly with Ryanair, just take a backpack, stay in a hostel, you can make it work. And instead of eating out, just like getting stuff from a grocery store and then like spending money on like one nice meal at a restaurant or a cafe, getting street food, like it does not have to be expensive. And like I said, I was traveling alone for most of that. At the beginning of TAPIFer, I had only traveled alone once, that trip to Nice I talked about. And so it was definitely like, felt weird at first, but I would really highly recommend solo travel to anyone who's interested in it. Like don't wait for other people to want to go on trips with you. If there's somewhere you want to go, just go, as long as it's a safe place, of course. If it's like somewhere that's known for not being good for solo female travelers, then maybe don't go there by yourself. But if you want to go to Portugal, if you want to go to somewhere else in France, if you want to go to London, go and experience things by yourself, because you're only going to be there maybe for this 1 year, and who knows when you'll be back, and just see what you want to see, do what you want to do, and you might make friends along the way. You never know what's gonna happen. Like in Antibes, actually, I just like ran into this family at a market and I was like, hey, are you guys American? Because I heard them speaking English, and they're like, yeah. And they had 2 daughters that were there studying abroad, and we ended up having dinner together, and it was so fun. So it's just like, you never know what's gonna happen or who you're gonna meet or what you're gonna see on a trip, and I love traveling. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and if you have any questions on anything I talked about, please let me know down below. I'd be more than happy to answer anything you guys are curious about, and I'll be posting a few more videos about other stuff soon, so stay tuned for that, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day or night. Bye!